My name is John Passfield, and the title of this reading will be John and Mother Goose Video 18, John's Reaction to Jack, Part 2. So here is my novella, John and Mother Goose, The Carnival of Tales, with John and Mother Goose talking on the cover. While driving his granddaughter home from daycare, John suddenly finds himself standing in the midway of a carnival of Mother Goose fairy tales. He's greeted by Jack, of Jack and Jill fame, who tells John that Mother Goose is expecting him as she has a role for him to play. But what does Mother Goose want? And why does she think John is a writer of detective stories? And why, when she meets John, does she greet him as almost a long-lost son? And for that matter, why do so many of the fairy tale characters have different stories they want John to write for them instead of the ones in which they have lived for hundreds of years? John is not a mythical creature. He's only a human after all. But can he save the Mother Goose Carnival? Can he solve the mystery of the vanishing fairy tales? In part 2 of John's reaction to Jack, John comes to the point where he feels he has to make a decision. So John does what seems to him to be the logical thing. He takes the information that he has about the situation of Mother Goose and her Carnival of Tales, and he takes the aspirations of Jack and the other mythical characters, and he tries to balance out the rights and the wrongs, the advantages and the disadvantages, the consequences of the decision that he feels compelled to make. In Chapter 6, John speaks to Jack about Jack's aspirations, after which John does some thinking for himself. So let's go to page 44 and have a look at that. Okay, first of all, John speaks to Jack about Jack's aspirations, desires, hopes, wishes. We seem to agree, Jack, that only a human can create a myth, or create a new myth in which a mythical creature, a mythical, can reside. But even if this were to happen, Jack, if we were to become partners in such an enterprise, there's a lot to take into account before we could come to an agreement to proceed. Have you thought, Jack, about unintended consequences? About what you would do if the new myth should fail, Jack, to take hold? Would Mother Goose not feel wounded? Might she refuse to take you back? And even success, Jack, could have its darker side. So there's John reasoning with Jack by asking Jack questions. Now, here's John thinking to himself about the whole situation. What's he going to do? He feels the need to make a decision. I don't fancy myself a detective, but the gaps in this narrative cry out for common sense. I've been doing some heavy thinking, and the human logic is here to see. Mother Goose has all the power. Mother Goose makes all the decisions. This is exactly the grumble that Jack expressed to me. So it follows that Jack the disgruntled, set himself a task. How to figure out a way to bring me, a writer, here to the Mother Goose Carnival of Tales so he could make his Hollywood pitch clandestinely to me. He knew that Mother Goose had a problem, that she suspected there'd been a murder or a kidnapping at least, so he, Jack, sly Jack, told Mother Goose that I was a writer of detective tales, which presumably he knew was not the case, so that she, Mother Goose, unsuspecting Mother Goose, would bring me here by whatever unknown means, available only to Mother Goose and to no one else, so that he, Jack, sinister Jack, could talk me into helping him break free. So it would follow then that Jack, sly Jack, sinister Jack, and Iago in short pants with a wooden pail is the culprit? Who else could it be? Who is lurking at the core of these strange events? So, congratulations, John. Thinking has always been your strength. This theory is about as airtight a piece of logic, human logic, could possibly be. Except, perhaps for Jack, mistaking me for a youthful filmmaker. Oh, and Mother Goose's sense of me as somewhat of a son. How these items fit into the puzzle, I can't quite tell. However, a little more thinking, a little more interpretation, a little more juxtaposing of seemingly disparate elements will, no doubt, create a spark which will illuminate the void. It's simply a matter of plugging the gaps in the logic pail. So that's John's thinking in chapter 6. Let's go to chapter 8, where John makes a decision and conveys that decision that he has made to Jack, after which John does some further thinking for himself, okay? So we're talking about human logic here and how well it works. Page 61. Okay? John speaks to Jack. He gives Jack the final decision. I'm sorry, but I'm going to say this bluntly, Jack. Yes, it's quite a story you tell. There are writers, I'm sure, who would die to have it land like this in their laps. But I'm not your kind of writer, Jack. I don't write screenplays. I don't write on spec. Writers write to form, Jack. I have a form that works well for me. My plate is full of potential novels. I can't wait to get back to work, so I'm going to turn down your offer, Jack. Yes, your story is quite intriguing. I'm sure it would make a blockbuster film, but you'll just have to find someone else to tell your tale. So he turns down Jack and the other mythicals. He's not going to write their new stories for them. Okay, then John does some further thinking. Is he right or is he wrong? What is the logic here? Oh, I had to steel myself, but I'm sure I made the right choice. What if I'd gone along? What if Jack had broken away? And what if this has created a character stampede? Well, would have been the end of an era, a cataclysmic event. Human culture would have turned a corner, wandered into a cultural desert, cut the lifeline to its roots in the distant past. It would have meant the destruction, the complete and utter destruction of the parallel mental world of nursery rhymes. Well, that's certainly not going to happen, not at least on my watch. Humans need the nursery characters. We need them in those roles. We can't allow them to move on. Every writer they might approach would feel the same. They had best give up these longings. The myths are not to be tampered with. I only hope that Jack will pass the word. Oh, Jack was a Brando, a Dean of passion, but surely that was no timeless myth, entertainment, self-aggrandizement, personal fantasy for sure. Climbing a mountain, rescuing a baby, becoming a mega movie star, a petty dream of gorgeous baubles, a fireworks display in one's own backyard, winning a lottery in which the prize is a brand new self. Oh, it's an entertaining story, but it doesn't have the resonance. It lacks the frame, the bones, the marrow of timeless myth. It doesn't rank by any criteria with The Hill, The Strenuous Climb, and The Wooden Pail. And what of me, unobtrusive John, bland and mild and unnoticed John, he who has led such a quiet life out of the way? Well, reluctantly I think this, but I've always faced reality head-on, felt the heat of the breath of the dragon, inserted my hand inside the trap, and sees the jewel, and now that the facts are evident, I can see nothing but to conclude that the world has been in peril. Perhaps I've been chosen by higher powers to play a part in the savior role, but I can't be sure. I know I'm no superhero, no mythical creature, no mythical, I mean. I'm just an everyday human, after all. But I believe I have done something very worthwhile today. Well, that's the end of John's thoughts on that topic. We make many decisions as we move through a typical day. I would guess that we not only make 100 decisions, we probably make thousands of decisions as we go about the business of our daily concerns. Most of these decisions are what one would call automatic or routine, and the implications of our decisions as to whether they're right or wrong are usually pretty small. Whether we sleep in an extra 10 minutes or not at the beginning of the day, or whether we go to bed a half hour earlier or a half hour later at the end of the day, probably doesn't make a lot of difference at all. But once in a while, we are faced with a major decision, and that seems to be the situation that we have here with John, the main character in this story. In Chapter 2 of the story, John strolls along the midway with Mother Goose in the middle, and John and Jack, of Jack and Jill fame, on either side. But as the story goes on, it seems to be that John is in the middle, and Jack and Mother Goose are the characters on either side. 2 points here. Number 1, Mother Goose is very concerned about the fate of the Carnival of Tales, and she asks John to help her to save the nursery rhyme tales from fading away. But number 2, Jack, on the other hand, can see a role for himself that has him leaving the Mother Goose Carnival of Tales, and John comes to understand that many more nursery rhyme characters want to leave as well. So what to do? It seems that everyone in the world has aspirations. It seems that every gain for someone will be a loss for someone else. Most of the time, I'm sure, as we open the newspaper or click on the TV or raise our laptop or check our phone to look at the news, it doesn't seem as if we have any decision-making power at all. Surely, we assume, those who do have decision-making powers have all of the information that they need and have the best intentions towards the people on both sides of an issue and will make the best decisions for all concerned. So, I would suggest that as readers of this story, we have a decision to make. Number 1, we can see this story as a story of one person with one decision to make. John has to make a decision as to whether to choose the aspirations of Jack and the other mysticals, or the aspirations of Mother Goose is more important. Or, number 2, we can see this as a story which lends itself to the vast movement of peoples all over our globe in seeking something different for themselves. Even reading a book can sometimes challenge us to make decisions. What is this book about? What are the rights and wrongs in each case? These are decisions that the readers of this story are invited to make for themselves. So this is my novella, John and Mother Goose, The Carnival of Tales. It's found on Amazon, where there's more information. It's found on my publisher's website, which is roxmillspress.com, where there's also more information. And at my website, johnpassfield.ca, there's a planning notebook, and there's a reflective journal, a contemplative journal, both of which you can access for free. If you go to johnpassfield.ca, look for the cover icon of the planning notebook and the journal about the Mother Goose Carnival of Tales and click on those covers. You'll get to read those books for free. And they contain thoughts about all the topics that such a story makes one think about. So have a look at johnpassfield.ca if you're interested. Lastly, I'll just say thank you for watching this video.